Hi, sorry, this one's late. I thought I had another week before I had to have this ready for you, and I blew it. So please accept my late homework. I'm going to start if I can find it on here. Uh, Boy, this thing times out really quick. I'm going to start with a little quote. We're doing the second chapter on the morality book, and I thought it'd be interesting. This is a good quote, if I can find it. There it is. There's the quote for you, my new circular light I've got here. Uh, Be gentle to all and stern with yourself. That's from St. Teresa of Avila. She's a doctor of the church, wrote completely in Spanish in, 500 years ago or something. Anyway, great saint, had a sense of humor at times, but was known for being really, really strict. She lived this, what she said. Uh, but then I've also got another one from St. Francis de Sales that I'll read for you here. Try again. This is from St. Francis de Sales. Have patience with all things, but first with yourself. Never confuse your mistakes with your value as a human being. You are a perfectly valuable, creative, worthwhile person simply because you exist. And no amount of triumphs or tribulations can ever change that. I think it's interesting that he says triumphs or tribulations. So the idea is that we all think, oh, just because you're having a hard time doesn't mean you're not worthwhile and everything else. But he says, just because you're having a victory, just because something goes really well, that isn't the reason why you are so absolutely precious to God. It's because he loves you, created you, and loves you. Uh, that is where our worth comes from, is from God, not from our morality, not from our ability to get to mass every single Sunday, which are all things we want to do, but that's not where our value comes from. That is when we respond to our own value. So let's get down to morality here. Let's see, what's a couple of things here that I want to cover. Now, you've obviously, I hope, read the book already. Uh, Morality is not for other people. Uh, First of all, it's how I am to live. Not, I'm not telling you, I'm telling you, what's in the book, what I've experienced, everything else. I tell you stories sometimes. I'd like to tell you more, but it's hard to do it over the video here. I don't know. But I'm going to work that out. Uh, so the idea is that, um, first of all, when we look at morality, we have to look at it as what am I called to do, not thinking about when you're reading something, and it says, oh, don't do this, don't do that, or do this or do that. Don't be thinking, oh, well, I know somebody that needs to hear this. No, you need to hear it. It's, we're not there to judge others and not even to judge ourselves. It's just looking at our own behavior and saying, is this the way that I live? And am I called to more? By the way, the answer is always going to be yes, I'm called to more, because nothing is good enough for us as far as God's concerned, only Himself. So He's always calling us to more until we have eternal blessedness in heaven, and at that point we have Him, and that's infinite, and oh my goodness, and it's wonderful. So it's how I'm to live. By the way, I've been listening to some interesting lectures on ancient stuff, ancient writers, and it's interesting that one of the big questions they have is, how am I to live? What constitutes a good life? Not just good in the sense that, oh, it's approved of by society or approved of by others, but in the sense that it's truly good, that it reflects the life of God, who is goodness. Uh, and whether it's something, there's a certain satisfaction that comes from living a good life. Uh, but mainly it's, what are we supposed to do with ourselves? So, and, for a lot of people, morality or ethics or the rules or whatever you want to call it, they're really about how people can live together and get along. And that's a wonderful thing. But that's not what the faith is about. Uh, in the faith, we are looking to live like Jesus. We're looking to be like Jesus because that is goodness. And because we're called to that. And if we truly are good, if we live in a good way, we are more like what we were meant to be, what we were created for. God doesn't create anyone for damnation. There's a whole group of a whole denomination of Christianity that tended toward that. But we don't believe that. If somebody really, really wants to reject God, they're able to do that. They have free will. But God did not intend for that. And of course, I've also been listening to some stuff lately, and they talk about, well, then God isn't all powerful if he can't make us do what we're supposed to do. But of course, it's free will. He's capable of creating us with free will, but the free will says that it isn't free will anymore. He's not going to take it away by forcing us to be good. So that might take a little more study. I don't know, but you can think about that one. But it's really important that he gives us the choice and respects that choice, because if he took the choice away, we wouldn't really be human beings anymore. We were made to be free, and we were given the ability to choose what's good. Okay, I'm kind of getting off subject here. Okay. So anyway, there's a communal aspect to morality because we all matter to each other, and you'll hear about that a lot. But ultimately, when we're looking at this, think about what you are called to do and not necessarily what your neighbor is called to do. We're called to be kind to others that are not always going to be kind to us. That's the way Jesus is. Jesus came and, gave us everything. I mean, he gave sight to the blind. He made the deaf to hear. He made the mute to speak. And he raised people from the dead. And we crucified him. So, if you're looking for getting a reward, you're not going to get it by being good, except in the long term. Okay, so with each of us. So in the gospel, one of the things that's interesting is, even though Jesus talked to the crowds, if you notice, there's a lot of times where he talked to one person. He talked to Nicodemus. He talked to, the man born blind. He did actions, and eventually he does talk to him. But everything was very personal with Jesus, and it was really not about coming to make everybody get along with each other. It was really coming to heal our brokenness and to help us be everything that the Father meant us to be when he created us. So one of my favorite ones that I enjoy about this is the story of the woman that had been ill, where she'd been basically hemorrhaging and having problems with her body for a really long time. And the doctors had not really been able to help her. It says that she'd spent, I think it said she gave her life savings to doctors to try and get it fixed, and nobody fixed it. So she heard about Jesus, and and you got to picture this. I actually have a slide thing. I'll put it on the thing. You may have seen it before, but I'll put it on the links for you. She thinks, Jesus could heal me. And if I could just touch his cloak, his robe type of thing, if I could just touch that, just touch the end of it, that would be enough to heal me. Sorry, I'm getting choked up now. And then, so she goes, and there's like this crowd all around Jesus and everything. And then she goes and she finally works her way through and just touches his cloak, and she feels herself being healed. And there's a whole beautiful thing on that healing. And oh man, it's great stuff, which I hope you'll look at. But the thing that's important about it is, it says that she does this, and that when she's healed, Jesus wheels around in the crowd and goes, "Who touched me?" And she's thinking, oh man, I'm in for it now, because now I've been found out. And then she's trying to hide to get back in the crowd. And he's going through, who did it? Who did it? And the apostles are going, are you crazy? I mean, look at how the crowd is all around you. And you're asking who touched me? Everybody's touching you. And he says, no, I felt healing power go out. And there's somebody here. So she realizes she can't get away from it. And I don't remember if she comes up to him or if he finds her, how it works. But basically, he faces her and says, your faith has saved you. He just wanted to tell her that. He just wanted to tell her that there was no magic, and that it was because she believed, because she had faith in him and faith in God. That's why she was healed, because she went to a lot of trouble to go through that crowd, and she believed so strongly in the power of God that just touching his cloak would be enough. But he answers her personally. I mean, he makes sure that it's person to person and not some vague thing in a crowd, and then she goes off and lives the rest of her life without ever having really met him. But he wanted her to meet him. He wanted to give her that. I honestly, I just think it's powerful. I spent a lot of time on that, but I don't know. I hope it's interesting for somebody. Uh, anyway, he gives personal attention. Uh, it isn't about a way of getting 7.5 billion people to get along. That would be, if everybody followed Christ well, that the world would be transformed, as fast as that could happen. Um, is that likely to happen? I don't know. Maybe we'll figure out something. But probably it's not going to happen in our lifetime that the whole world follows Christ and has perfect peace and joy. Uh, anyway, so it answers the question, how shall I live? What are my obligations to other people? Um, and especially, what are my obligations to those that don't love me? I mean, Jesus said, love your enemies. That's putting it pretty strongly. Uh, so let's see. So from the book, God's covenant with us. It had to start somewhere. So it started with what became the Jewish people. And then that is where Jesus, in a sense, is inserted into time, inserts himself into time, is born, lives, a number of years on the earth, teaches us, and goes through the whole passion with the sufferings, the death, the resurrection. But there needed to be a place to plant that. But, if you look in the Old Testament, this is why it's so important to read the Bible. If you look in the Old Testament, you'll see in there hints in the prophets where they say, this is not just about one race of people, one group. This is for everybody. The ones that come to mind is one that Jesus quotes in the gospel. My house is a prayer. My house is a house of prayer for all peoples. Saying, in the Jewish days before Jesus, only Jewish people could go into the temple. But you have this prophet that they acknowledge as a prophet that says it's a house of prayer for all people. There's also, that through Abraham, so shall the whole world be blessed. There's things like that. So it's pretty big stuff, actually. Anyway, had to start somewhere. In the Ten Commandments, it's interesting. It says in the book, the first 3 commandments are about our relationship with God. Worship him alone, no idols, keep the Sabbath day holy. And then the other 7 are about our relationships with other people. So the greatest commandment, according to Jesus, when somebody asked him, Master, what's the greatest commandment? He said, to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, that's just, anyway, that's called the Great Commandment, which is actually 2, but it's really 1. So, right now, there's a lot of focus on us, on me, you'll hear the term self-care a lot. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it's not within the faith. Yeah, you have to take care of yourself. I mean, I go and work out and go ride the bike, and I try to keep myself in decent shape, so I can keep this body going so that I can teach class and go to work and do all my other stuff I have to do. If I fall apart, then I'm going to spend all my time at the doctor getting myself patched up, and I'm going to spend all my money on pills, and that's no good. So it's better for me to go natural and just take care of myself. Well, that's fine. But I would do the same for somebody else, and I encourage other people to do it. I encourage my wife to go out and get some exercise, which, if she does it or not, the point is, I encourage it because I care. My children somewhat follow my example, but, we could all probably use a little more exercise. Okay, so the idea is that focusing on God brings us life. Focusing on ourselves, often it kind of puts us in a defensive position. We're trying to feel valuable. We're trying to feel good about ourselves. From a lot of your videos, a lot of you are not this way. A lot of you are so wonderful. I'm going to do a reaction video for your responses because, man, there's some incredible responses in there. It's just absolutely amazing. And you give me all kinds of ideas. Sometimes I make notes about stuff to do based on what I hear because some of you are really thinking. Anyway, So a lot of the stuff, the focus on the self, actually ends up making us defensive. We kind of clench up and we're just trying to, um, just trying to feel good about ourselves and not really, really reaching out to others unless it's to feel like we're reaching out to others so we feel good about ourselves. But when we put the focus on God, it drives us outward. Um, it's not defensive at all. Filled with the Holy Spirit, um, we run out into the world like crazy people. We run out into the world to love them, to love others as God loves them. I mean, God's loving everybody in the world. And when our focus is on God and we live in God, that Holy Spirit just drives us out to go love those people actively. So all the usual things people talk about, feeding the poor, helping those that are out of work and everything else, all those things are done because we're driven to love them by the love of God. The love of God kind of flows through us as a channel of it. Uh, but when we're starting out, as some people do, to do a lot of those things to feel good about themselves, it kind of poisons it. And sometimes you can kind of tell that people are doing it for themselves and not really doing it for the other person. A lot of the time you can tell because they get angry when something doesn't work the way they want it to. When you're doing things really out of the love of God, then you don't tend to get as angry. You just sort of realize, they're not grateful. That's okay. Look what we did to Jesus. Uh, so it's okay. Anyway, so we kind of live out in this crazy way where we just love everybody and just live life. I mean, it really is quite a life, let me tell you. Uh, so there's a prayer that came from St. Ignatius Loyola, and it's, Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for reward, except to know that I am doing your will, that I'm like you. I mean, and anyway, I don't know, for me, I really like that. Um, there's a wildness to it. I really like it. Uh, Sorry, I get very enthusiastic sometimes. And it's New Year's Day, by the way, when I'm recording this. So yeah, I guess it's a feast day. Mary, Mother of God. It's a feast day today. Or St. Paul says, and this is, I don't like to use the term power, but when you live in the Holy Spirit, when you live this way, there is a certain power that comes from it. Not power over other people, but just that sense of God loving through us is a very powerful thing. Uh, St. Paul says, I know how to live in humble circumstances. I also know how to live with abundance. In every circumstance and in all things, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of living in abundance and of being in need. I can do all things in him who strengthens me. Anyway, so that's living in a wild, wonderful way. We're talking about morality here. Why am I going through all this? So the point is that I'm trying to say that our morality, our sense of what's right and wrong, has to come from a strong, strong base in God. It has to come from our faith. It has to come. Sorry, this thing keeps turning off on me. It has to come from deep in God, who is in our heart, from the Holy Spirit. Um, Trying to follow the things that we're going to be learning about as a set of rules that are observed really doesn't work very well. We don't always respond to that. And people say, well, we're going to do this thing. You're going to do the good stuff. You're going to follow the 10 Commandments so you go to heaven. But, for a lot of people, not so much for me right now, heaven seems far away. I mean, I'm old, so, I could go at any minute. Hopefully I make it through this video. But, for you when you're young, it's just not something that's on your mind all the time. And heaven is very far away. And some people think, oh, I got a lot of time to get to a good life. I'm going to go have some fun now. But if it's all about the relationship with God and letting the Spirit of God, letting the love of God flow through us, then it's not about reward anymore. Like he says, in St. Ignatius, to labor and not to ask for reward. It's just, it's kind of funny, people have, somebody the other day, one of my housemates, actually, we have folks that live here with us. Now that our children moved out, we have other folks, friends of theirs actually, that live in their rooms, and it's cheap, so it's good. So the idea is that the one, he asked me, and he said, well, what do you do for yourself? And actually, one of my grandchildren just asked me this morning. They're staying with us right now. What's your favorite thing to do? And we had been talking about life, and she's 8, and oh my goodness, she's amazing. That's just the stuff, and we have these great conversations, very much like what we talk about here. Anyway, and I told her, I said, well, my favorite thing to do right now is to talk with you. I'm doing my favorite thing right now. And I said, later on, I'm going to make this video for the confirmation class, and that will be my favorite thing. Because whatever I'm doing, that's my favorite thing if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So something to think about. Okay, next. So in the book, first commandment, no other gods. I am the Lord your God. You shall put no other gods before me. And again, we tend to interpret almost everything in the faith, and this is really sad. We interpret a great deal in the faith and in our relationship with God according to the rules of people, according to the way people are. If somebody said to you, I want you to put me first and nobody else, you can't have any other friends, just only me, you go, well, you're a whack job. You're kind of a nut. Because no, that's just not appropriate for a human being. But it's also not the way God is, that it's about him getting something from us. It's really about God protecting us from all the false gods. And there's a lot of false gods. Oh my goodness. And that's where all the money is to be made right now, is in selling people false gods. So what are some of them out there? I just put a quick list. The idolatry of money. Idolatry is when you worship something other than God. But man, people are such a big deal about money. And, here's my goals. They had the thing in the book about the guy saying, that's my goal. He who dies with the most toys wins. I want all these yachts. And it's like, come on, that's just giving yourself to something that doesn't last. Idolatry of money, people that are obsessed with power, with fame, trying to get those likes, trying to get those subscriptions. By the way, subscribe here. I'm sorry, but on YouTube, do subscribe, because I don't get any money for it. But if you subscribe, then you'll see it. And even after confirmation, maybe you want to look at a video once in a while. I'm going to keep doing these. I've got 150 of them that I still need to do, not just for class, but for other stuff. And you're welcome to look at them. Whew. Power of fame, pleasure. I can understand that one. It's really nice to do things we enjoy, and sometimes they're not good things. Wasting time. We can give ourselves to wasting time, just throwing away time. It's a horrible insult to God when you think about it. Peer pressure in friendships actually can be a kind of idolatry. Sometimes we put people ahead of God and try to please them and maintain those because we feel more valuable when we have a lot of friends. Or sometimes you get attached to one and that friend just kind of runs your life, and not a very good thing. All these things are dead ends. They don't really go anywhere. And certainly any happiness from them doesn't last to the end of the world. And sometimes it doesn't last very long at all. So it's in the Bible, in the books of the prophets. One of the things they talk about is, at the time they were talking about literal idols, wooden things somebody carved and then called it a god. And then they, put offerings in front of it and do the whole thing. And they would say, you're worshiping this thing that doesn't really see. It has eyes, carved on it, but it doesn't really see. And it can't really do anything for you. And on top of that, people made it. How can you worship something people made? I mean, did you ever think about the fact that people made being famous? People made fame. The way we treat celebrities, we just made that up. It's not natural. It's not something that, that God wants us to be doing. It doesn't mean that it's always a sin to like somebody's acting that they do or something. But, really think about that. Well, that's something that we made. And anyway, okay. One of the commandments is don't take the Lord's name in vain. And that's kind of interesting. There's people that say, OMG, I got that right there. And you know what that stands for, but it's taking God's name in vain. Sorry, when we say the name of God not in a prayer, but just saying it. There's some people that swear, using God's name. That's worse. Um, some of the ideas where we would say it are really originally were prayers. Something bad happens, and you do that, you're kind of praying, but we've lost that, and people are saying that they don't even believe in God. Uh, we taught our children that even saying "Oh my goodness" is really just a substitute for saying "Oh my God," and and in that, I mean, it's a hard habit to break. I still find myself doing that, "Oh my goodness" once in a while. And there's some things we just say without even thinking, but it's probably not a great thing, and I do try to work on it. So maybe that's something that you want to work on too. Uh, okay, what I thought was interesting in the book is on page 21, and you can go look at that. Pause this and go look at it if you want. Uh, Respect the need for the other person to observe the Lord's day. So if you're a coach or you're trying to arrange a practice or something, the idea is to not arrange it for a Sunday. Um, so that can be a day of rest. There's a story in the gospel where Jesus and the apostles are walking through fields of grain on the Sabbath, and the apostles are just picking off little bits of like the top of a piece of wheat, and just chomping on it. Uh, and the Pharisees, the religious authorities of the time, said, "Hey, what are you doing? It's Sunday. That's harvesting. Don't do that." And Jesus had some good things to say there, but at one point he says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Now, by the way, a little point here. For them, in the Jewish faith, Saturday is the Sabbath. That's the day of rest. And Sunday was just simply the first day of the week. But Jesus was resurrected on Sunday. So that's the reason why we go to Mass on Sunday. And for us, that's the Lord's Day. But for Jewish people, it's Saturday and it starts at Friday at sundown. And if they're really observant, they don't do any work. I mean, there's all kinds of rules that they follow on this stuff to be really serious about it. It's kind of interesting to look it up sometime. I'll tell you a funny story that relates to what's in the book on page 21, though. That I worked for a company for about 5 years, selling electronics and managing a small retail store. And we had one other manager who was one of the best ones. His name was Eliezer. He was Jewish, and he was very observant Jewish. I mean, he had the yarmulke, he wore the tassels, everything. He dressed. I mean, you could tell. I don't know if he was Hasidic, probably was, but he was very serious about it. And so it was mandatory at this company that you worked every Saturday. And he was Jewish, and he was not going to work on Saturday. So on Saturdays, on Friday night, he would take off early because that was the beginning of the Sabbath at sundown. He would take off early. He would not come into work on Saturday. And if any of his employees had an issue at the store, one of us other managers would take care of it. They would call us and we would help them. And we would do whatever we had to do to support Eliezer. And the idea was, like it says in the book there, except, you might have thought this is just talking about Catholics, but if you're working with somebody that's Jewish and there's a situation where you can keep the Saturday, their Sabbath day, that's the reason why in Spanish it's Sábado. It's where it comes from. It's the Sabbath. We lost that on Saturday because it got named after the planet or after the god Saturn. Anyway, that's another thing. You can look that up. So with the idea is though that if somebody is Jewish and their holy day is Saturday, and you can avoid putting them in a position that gets in the way of that, then you do it. If they're Muslim and you are planning a party during Ramadan that requires, that starts before sundown, don't do that. Move it later and let them come when it's okay. Because during Ramadan, they fast during the day and then they eat after sundown. So that's an interesting thing. If you go to a Muslim themed restaurant, Mediterranean cuisine of some kinds, during Ramadan, they won't actually open the restaurant for eating until sundown. So we respect that. We even respect it when it's other religions. We still do, because this is just love. This is how we live. Okay. So going back, one more thing on the morality stuff here, and there's a lot that's good in the book that you can look at, but it's so natural for us to put things in terms of trying to please God to stay out of trouble. The idea is that God won't do good things for us if we don't obey him, so we obey in the hope of a reward. And, oh, I want to get an A on this test, so I'm going to be a good person. And it doesn't work that way. You get an A on the test if you study hard and if you have the brains to do it. And most of you, if you study hard enough, you can do it. But it's not about, the word is propitiation, which means that you're basically trying to please some God so that you'll get what you want. And that's not what this is. This is a relationship of love that starts with God loving us. And partly we love him back by not hurting others. We love him back by obeying and trusting. It's more about the trust. We obey these things that we're going to be learning about because we trust that this is what's good for us, because we trust God. Really think about that and maybe comment on that in your response. How you feel about that? Have you thought about this before? That the idea is not that you're trying to please God so you don't get punished, but that you're trying to do the things that God has said because you know that he's right. Because you know that if you do that, that's your best shot at happiness, not just heaven. Even here, a lot of the time, doing the right thing is going to make you happier. Not always, but a lot of the time it will. It really depends on the society you're living in. In some places, doing the right thing will get you killed. In other places, the people will let you live. God is not a tyrant that's like forcing you to either do these laws or go to hell. That's just not the way it works. The way it works is you're going to be happy if you do the things I'm telling you, if you trust me, and if you do, you'll be fit for heaven. But if you really want to go your own way, then you'll get that and you'll end up in hell, because that's the only fit place for somebody that doesn't worship God, that just wants themselves and just wants their own way. They get their own way. I could tell you so much more about this. It's very, very interesting. But bottom line, it's probably more accurate to say that that people cast themselves into hell than that God casts them into hell. It's just that we put things in terms of power. We put things in terms of earthly stuff. So we picture God like a king that when he's disobeyed puts people in prison. And that's really not the way it is. That's not what the church teaches. But it's the way that people have understood it because it's simple. But simple isn't always right. His only concern for us is that we become everything that we could be. And he alone fully understands what that takes. That's why we look to God for guidance. And the scriptures, the teachings of the church, hopefully something you get out of this class, those things are helping you become who you were meant to be. And that may not be that different from the way you are now. Maybe you're in really great shape and maybe you have a lot to change. But it's all about you becoming something wonderful and what you were meant to be, and not about obeying some big boss in the sky. Some people try to make deals. I've heard this, oh, if you'll do this for me, I'll go to church every day for the rest of my life, and it's like, come on. God is not a vending machine. It isn't like you put these prayers in and you get something back. People don't get what they pray for a lot of the time. And I can tell you at this point in my life especially, but I've been this way a lot. I just don't tend to pray for stuff. I'm not saying I wouldn't. And there are times I when the job is a little funny and I go, well, Lord, I hope, I like working here. I'd like to keep working here. But on the other hand, and I go, you know what, but whatever you want me to do, I'll go wherever you send me. And whatever happens, I'm just glad that he's with me. Anyway, you'll see some stuff in there too about superstition and everything else. Just make sure you're not being superstitious in the religion. Don't turn this into superstition. If you say X number of prayers, it does not guarantee you will get what you want. Unless what you're asking for is the Holy Spirit. If you're asking to become holy and you pray for that every day, you will become holy. If that's what you really want, you will absolutely become holy. Um, okay, I guess the one last thing I was going to say was, you may have experienced this. Sometimes we have a relationship with who we think someone is, but we're not really having a relationship with the person. And everything they say, we just bend it, to kind of fit what we think of them. If we have a certain picture of people, we tend to keep that. And sometimes we don't listen to them anymore. We're just always interpreting it according to what we think they are. And people sometimes do that with God. They form an image of God in their head, that this is what he's like. And then they do everything in religion that way. They do it to please that God, which is really a projection of themselves. It's really just them. They've just made it up in their head. So do think about that and make sure that we're working to understand who God is as God and not as something that we made up. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. Sorry again for being late. I'm going to go work on the next week so that I won't be late for that one. And I'm looking forward to your responses. A lot of those responses are just amazing, and I really appreciate it. I just love watching you and hearing what things you have to say. Thank you.